it's for sure effort. The inconvenient truth of healthy living is that effort is absolutely required. But I think when the effort is suffering, people ultimately quit.
That's going to be the Facebook quote for this video right there. That was good. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Chimera Coffee. Let's get real for a moment. We all love us some coffee. We got the boost in mental clarity, energy, mood. But what's the downside? Lots of these coffee brands do more harm than good in terms of our long-term energy. We get that crash. Chimera Coffee solved that problem. And this is where it gets really cool. Chimera Coffee sources their single origin beans from over 5,000 feet of elevation. Then they infuse it with the highest quality nootropics. What are nootropics? Well, if you've never heard of them, to simplify it, they're essentially brain vitamins. They help promote a bunch of stuff like focus, cognition, memory, and just mental health in general. So I was a bit skeptical, and then they sent me some. And, I pride myself being from Seattle. I'm a bit of a coffee purist. And been using this stuff before interviews, and I can notice a significant difference in my mental acuity. I think I'm more in tune with the guests, and I can process things better in my head. There's always that awkward pause after we're done talking about something where I either have to ask the next question or follow up with what they said. And sometimes, I have this brain fog, and it feels like I can't even do it. But I switched to this over the past 5 or 6 interviews, and I've really noticed that gap in between them finished talking and me asking the next question has shrank. I'm going to continue using this, and if you want to try it, head on over to Chimera Coffee. That's with a K, so it's KIMERAKOFFEE. Again, that's ChimeraCoffee.com. And if you use the promo code PaleoHacks, all spelled out, you get 10% off your entire order. Paleo Hackers, my next guest is an MD, university professor, dad, speaker, and author. His book, The Diet Fix, was the #1 Canadian best-selling book. Here with us today, Dr. Yoni Freedhoff. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I went to your blog, and I have a really serious question right off the bat, Yoni. Are you an Instagram husband?
I am not an Instagram husband, no. My wife, she does post some pictures, but she is not as savvy as some of the Instagrammers out there, that's for sure.
There was a video Yoni posted as a Fun Friday video, and it basically poked fun at the fact that a lot of us guys in long-term relationships get caught behind the camera for the good sake of Instagram. So that was a funny one, though. And
probably girls, too. I know some guys who like taking a lot of pictures of themselves. It's probably not just one way.
I've been known to make my girlfriend the human selfie stick for me. I'm quite a diva when it comes to Instagram. So aside from the Instagram husband, MD, it's a pretty rigorous path to get there, university professor. I'm curious how you got interested in health.
Well, so it was partly by accident, I guess. I actively skipped most of the nutrition lectures in medical school. I went to University of Toronto, and we actually have some prestigious folks over there. David Jenkins, who invented the glycemic index. I remember he was the one who was teaching us nutrition. And I remember not enjoying it at all. And so I ended up going through medical school thinking perhaps I'd go into emergency medicine. And then I did that for a while and found that the life and death stuff just made me sad rather than excited. And so I ended up going into family medicine. And family medicine is sort of a grab bag of everything. And you see a little bit of a lot of things. And what I did see a lot of, though, was obesity for sure. And other what would be describable as chronic non-communicable diseases. Diseases like diabetes and hypertension and high cholesterol. Diseases that do respond to lifestyle change. And people kept asking me, what diet should I go on? What program should I do? I didn't really have any answers. And so that, plus a little bit of serendipity, it was before we had kids, and there was a conference on obesity that was being held in Las Vegas, and I felt like going to Las Vegas, and so I went, and I liked it. And then it sort of grew from there.
So you just kept learning more and more until...
Yeah, so there's only one body in North America that provides any certification in obesity medicine. It's called the American Board of Obesity Medicine. And so I pursued certification. I was the third person who received certification by that board in Canada. That was back in 2005. And my office that I run here, we opened that in 2004. And I haven't looked back. I mean, it's all I do.
So you specialize then in obesity and weight loss?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. So,
Okay.
I see myself much more as a clinician than I do as a researcher or anything else. I think that my strengths and my practice has been trying to help people actually affect behavior change, which is not an easy feat. I think we're okay at it. I think that it's one of those things where, there's going to be people who respond to your style and your approach and people who don't. And that's true for anything. It's like medicine. There are some people who respond differently to different medicines. And it's the same idea with behavior change.
Yeah. So with obesity, then right off the bat, I'm kind of curious, what's the difference between taking maybe an obese person who's got so much changes ahead of them and weight to lose versus the typical American or Canadian who's 10, 20 pounds overweight? Is there much of a difference there, or is it pretty similar?
I think behavior change is difficult for everybody. I mean, we're all crappy at it, I think is the best way to put it. Think about all the things in our own lives that we know we should do better with, whether it's exercising, whether it's diet, whether it's in our relationships or our studies. We can often identify the things that would benefit us to change. It's just affecting those changes is a real challenge. And so some of the people who don't struggle with weight doesn't mean they live any better or any more healthfully as people who do struggle. I know plenty of people without weight on a scale who are incredibly unhealthy when it comes to their lifestyles. So, I really do think that there's a lot of common ground just in general with behavior change that we see with people with obesity and people without.
That's really awesome. You're focusing on behavior change and not necessarily just throwing information at people, because that's a theme that comes up on the show time and time again, is that information's not the problem. No one's smoking because of a lack of information on lung cancer.
And I think with weight too, given the incredible bias in society directed angrily at people with obesity, nobody wants this. It's not something that people go to bed at night thinking, oh, I'm going to try to gain weight tomorrow, or I don't want to lose weight. The majority of people with weight to lose do want to lose it. It's always the number one New Year's resolution every single year. So when you've got a situation where the people with the condition desperately don't want to have the condition, and then you've also got a situation where there's a lot of people out there who are suggesting they know how to help those people. What's the disconnect? And then there may be listeners or viewers who also are still stuck in the paradigm of, well, it's just eat less and move more and everybody will be fine. But that's as useful a truism as buy low, sell high is to becoming millionaires. And it doesn't work. It's true. It's definitely true. But it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, it's an oversimplification, which is dangerous.
Yeah. And so we see that in obesity a huge amount. And I think it's only with obesity that people moralize about it. And what I mean by that is it's thought that about 80% of chronic non-communicable diseases are preventable by way of lifestyle change. Wow. But the only one we moralize about is obesity. We don't moralize about diabetes. We don't moralize about hypertension. We don't moralize about depression. We don't moralize about different cancers. And yet, lifestyle will affect all of those things, in many cases preventing or treating those problems. It's an unfortunate situation that there's so much hatred, true hatred, directed to people with obesity. And it starts at an incredibly young age. You mentioned I'm a dad. I've got 3 little girls. And so I'm stuck watching a lot of cartoons. The fat jokes exist in all these cartoons as well. It really is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, it's got to be hard too. I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like to be obese and kind of be at the short end of the stick for society's jokes and cartoons and stuff like that. And
I was reading my girls Harry Potter, and I couldn't help but think. I'm sure most people who are watching this have read Harry Potter or seen the movies, and they'll know that there's the Dursley families, the cousins that Harry stayed with, and the Dursleys, they all had obesity, but their obesity, their weight was written in a way to personify their gluttony, their sloth, their laziness, their evilness. And that is the way the world views people with obesity. And so the one thing people with obesity never lack is the societal foisting of guilt and shame onto them on a virtually daily basis.
Yeah.
So if guilt and shaming people actually helped, we wouldn't have this problem because everybody with obesity has plenty of guilt and shame directed at them.
So describe maybe an average person you're seeing who's obese and kind of the before and after, if you have one, because I'm sure there's someone listening right now who's maybe tried so many different diets, they're clinically obese, and they're feeling a little discouraged. Do you have any sort of before and after stories that come to mind?
Well, so, as a physician, you're not allowed to talk about people directly. It's one of those rules that we've got. You can't even sort of give descriptors because if somebody happens to recognize the descriptors, they could run into a problem. But what I will say is we have 3 different programs running in my office. We work with regular adults whose weights are concerning to them and they want to lose weight through medical, non-surgical means. We're also responsible for processing about 20% of Ottawa, where I live. Ottawa's bariatric surgical patients work through us here as well. And then we work with parents of children whose weight are of concern. And again, I think what's important in the way we approach things where we may differ from some is our goal setting. And so the goal here is not some idealized weight. It's not BMI on a BMI table. It's not trying to get people to no longer be classifiable as having obesity. We call it best weight. It's a term I coined in 2006. And a person's best weight is whatever weight they reach when they're living the healthiest life they actually enjoy. There will come a point for anyone, for lots of different reasons, where they could not happily eat any less and they could not happily exercise anymore. And their weight with that life is terrific. That's their best. We accept our personal bests as great in everything, except, it would seem, lifestyle change. And so we try to instill that in every single person we meet.
So I was watching one of your YouTube videos, and it was our weight should be ideal, breaking that myth. Is that what you're talking about right there?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there is this belief that we should all be on a certain place in the scale. And it's not just a myth of societal, it's not just society saying so or medical community. It's individuals, too. I mean, I sometimes call it the Boston Marathon of weight loss. I'm a really slow runner. I like running. I've been running since I was 16 years old. But, my ancestors did not chase down animals. We must have trapped them because I am biomechanically rather useless. So I will never qualify for Boston. But if I thought to myself that the only purpose in running or the only true runners or the only value would be to qualify, I would have quit decades ago because I'm never getting there. I think with weight management, the number of people who get to their, dream places with weight loss or the healthy BMI, it's as rare as a runner qualifying for Boston. It happens, but if that's the goal, you're going to likely fail. And so instead, it's enjoying running and not having artificially built goals. And here I'm not talking about smart goals. I'm just talking about realistic goals. I mean, this is real life where food is a comfort. It's a celebration. And if you can't use food as a comfort or a celebration, you're going to stop whatever diet is restricting your ability to live like a normal human being.
That brings to mind, I had a friend who was super into the fitness modeling competitions, and he would get down to crazy low numbers of body fat, somewhere like 5%, even below 7%, and he'd be ripped out of his mind for that one day or the photo shoot. And I'd ask him, how do you feel? And he says, miserable, because he's restricting water, he's restricting all this. So where I'm getting at is to even compare yourself with the ideal. On the outside, it might look all good and dandy, but on the inside, even those people, they don't feel good. They don't feel like the ideal. So maybe that's not the ideal after all.
Yeah, it might not be. And, sticking with Boston as an example, I mean, there are runners out there, who really can do distance regularly and enjoy themselves and find it wonderful. The head of our training program here in my office, she's qualified for Boston. She's running Boston next month. She's miserable with how much she has to run right now. Like she's a mom. She's got a couple of kids. She's working really hard to get the long runs in. She's not yet at her taper time. And, it doesn't look fun at all. And in many cases, the amount of sacrifice and suffering required to lose everything brings you into a realm of non-sustainable approach. And that is, again, temporary. Temporary efforts only have temporary outcomes.
So your book, The Diet Fix, Why Diets Fail, and how to make yours work. I guess when someone comes up to you on the street or in your clinic and they show you your book and they say, okay, why do diets fail? We kind of went over that, but how do you make diets work? What is your approach?
I mean, the overarching idea is that we have to eliminate suffering. And so that's different for different people, right? So I don't believe that there's one right diet. I'm very egalitarian. Whatever diet a person enjoys enough to sustain that actually helps them live a healthier life, I'm all for, whether it's paleo, whether it's low carb, whether it's low fat, whether it's vegan. I really don't care, so long as a person can honestly say to me, I could happily live like this for the rest of my life. And so the goal in the Diet Fix, the book, is to help give people a tool with which to figure out, well, how do I tweak what I'm doing to make it livable long term? It might lead to a slower loss. It might lead to a lesser loss. But the hope is that it leads to a more permanent loss, because ultimately that's all that really matters.
Sure. And are some of the principles in the Diet Fix, would they be compatible with like a low carb or a real food diet
They'd be compatible with anything. I mean, that was the point. So a lot of the book is about attitudes. It's about trying to cultivate this idea of best weight. It's about trying to accept the fact that personal bests are great and that there is no right place to be and that our best efforts will vary. You know, I just booked a trip with my wife for the first vacation we've had in 2 years without kids. And we're heading to Jamaica to one of those all-inclusive places. And I guarantee you the best that I will do without kids at a Jamaican all-inclusive is not going to be as good. So having this dynamic best, embracing imperfection, because it's certainly not going to be perfect, I think is crucial. People sometimes, they really pigeonhole themselves into particular diets. And then when they sort of sin and they break their religious diet, they feel so much guilt, eventually they quit. And trying to take that away from whatever approach a person is undergoing is a really important piece that I think spans diets as a whole, because what we're trying to fix is the attitude of people towards dieting and weight loss in general, not any one particular diet.
Yeah. You're going to be an Instagram husband in Jamaica for sure.
We'll see.
So I saw a chapter titled PTDD, Posttraumatic Dieting Disorder, and I love that. And so that kind of ties in, I guess you can explain it with the whole guilt and shame aspect.
Yeah, so, again, it doesn't affect everybody who loses weight, but plenty of people who, especially people who have lost weight and regained it multiple times, and unfortunately that's a large number of people, it's beyond disappointing, right? So regaining your weight after you've lost it, of course it's a disappointment. People work hard to lose their weight. They gain it back. It's disappointing. But there's certainly a percentage of people for whom it goes way beyond simple disappointment, and it reaches more into the realm of true depression, where it affects a person's self-esteem. It affects their relationship with others and with themselves. It affects their self-efficacy and their feelings of self-worth. It can be a really devastating thing. And so I've called it post-traumatic dieting disorder because, that is what we're seeing, is we're seeing these people undertake recurrent sort of traumatic diets and then develop this sort of syndromal feelings of very negative feelings that in turn span more into mental health. I'm not suggesting it should be in the DSM-5. I don't think it needs its own criteria. It's a bit more illustrative than it is diagnostic, but I do think it is a real phenomena that for some people, it is far more than just disappointing to regain their weight.
Yeah. So someone who's regained their weight comes up to you on the street and they say, Dr. Freedhoff, I've tried everything. I've tried, dieting. I got PTDD, or I got guilt and shame around it. How do I lose the weight? I'm ready. What are kind of some strategies that you recommend to people out there?
Sure. So, over we've got what I call the 10-day reset in the book. And so what we're trying to do in those 10 days is not to affect a miraculous amount of weight loss, but to try to change the way people approach weight management and sort of the thinking around it. Some of the basic principles, keeping track is huge. So the studies on keeping track, whether it's calories, whether it's carbs, whether it's macros, whether it's just particular foods, keeping track in some form is hugely powerful. So I certainly encourage people to keep track. Personally, I used calories in a food diary. It really doesn't matter. keeping track has value beyond the numbers that are actually being tracked. Keeping track is a tool that reminds people to change behavior. The other thing I feel strongly about is for people who struggle with weight, and especially people who struggle with what they would describe as control, hunger is not a friendly thing. So there are people out there who are fine when they're faced with hunger. Those generally aren't the people that I meet. The people that I meet when faced with hunger, and hunger is not just growling in a stomach, it's cravings and compulsive drive to eat. Those are just flip sides of the same coin. Hunger's not their friend. And so I think people sometimes, they can understand what I'm getting at when they think about supermarket shopping. You go shopping to the supermarket when you're hungry. Studies have been done, and we didn't need studies to know this. You shop differently, right? Like you do. Everybody does. Sit down to a meal hungry, and you're shopping from your plate, your cupboard, your freezer, a menu. The choices will be really different. And so cultivating a dietary approach that takes away cravings and hunger is crucial. Generally, in the book, what I recommend is what seems to work for the majority of people in the office here, which is the old school, multiple meals, multiple snacks throughout the day. That said, we've got people in my office who are, having 3 meals a day. We've got people who are doing 2 meals in terms of sort of the sort of kind of IF approach that people have been taking for a while. I don't have anybody on alternate day fasts at this point, but I'd certainly be open to it if somebody was interested. All this to say, the goal is the control of intake without it being a huge fight all the time. Because, food is one of the seminal pleasures of our lives, all of our lives. Again, food, it's the second most important thing we do behind breathing. And we've got mechanisms and physiology in our bodies that drive us to do so, that trump reason when we're hungry. And so taking that away is really important to me. And then combining those two things together, what we're looking to have people do in the Diet Fix and in our offices here is to identify what matters for them. To try to use that tool, that food diary, whatever you're tracking, to also track hunger and cravings and control and start looking for patterns. You get a frame of reference. It's like my kids do science fair experiments. They get a hypothesis and then they test different experimental modalities on that hypothesis. It's the same idea. But giving people, again, the permission to not be stuck with one rigid approach, because I think the rigidity breaks people.
Yeah, that kind of dogmatic. You have to do 5 meals a day, or you have to do 1 meal a day and then skip 5, or again, kind of what we talked about earlier. It's not necessarily about the information, it's about the application. And so when people come out saying you only have to eat 1 meal a day, and I've tried it, well, I'm a lot more hungry and I eat a lot worse during that 1 meal than if I were eating 5 or 6.
Yeah, and I've seen that myself personally. So I'm Jewish, and so we have 1 day a year. I mean, I'm not a religious guy. I don't believe in an angry man in the sky, but for whatever reason, every year I do, like many people in my religion, we do this fast called Yom Kippur, where it's 26 hours, no eating or drinking. And so I kept a food diary for 3 years without missing a day, just to know exactly what's involved and be able to, understand what I was asking my patients to do. And what was interesting is each of those 3 years, when I looked at what I ate at the end of that fast, so this is a once-a-day meal, I'd consume more in the way of calories than I would when I was having multiple meals and snacks. And we weren't gorging on indulgent food. At the end of 26 hours, nobody wants to cook anything. It's like, it's stereotype food. It's bagels and cream cheese and lox and quiche and, nothing that's difficult. But you're so hungry, you put it away so fast, it makes a big impact. And so again, there are those who do well on that approach, but I've not found them to be fairly common. There's a rare individual, I think, who really enjoys that approach enough to want to be on it forever, and where they don't go overboard when they do finally eat each day.
It can be really mentally taxing, that whole kind of binging and fasting approach, and it develops an unhealthy relationship with food. I've noticed for myself. I think about food way too much when I'm not eating, and then when I am eating, I'm getting all these buzzers going off in my head. The pleasure sensors are just on overload.
Yeah, there's people who love it. So Brad Pilon from Eat Stop Eat, and he's a friend of mine, and he finds, I don't want to speak for him, but certainly in the discussions we've had online about this sort of thing, it sounds like he really enjoys it. It doesn't tax him, but, I think about my experiences, and maybe it's just a matter of getting used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I dread that day each year. It's not a fun day.
Yeah, he was on the show, and he said something that I've always laughed about. He says that the reason people obsess about food is because for a lot of people, it's the one awesome thing they have left.
Yeah.
Like they have.
And it never lets you down, right? So
Yeah.
Everything else in our lives, unfortunately, from time to time will let us down. Our loved ones, our jobs, ourselves. But not food. If you love Chunky Monkey, Ben and Jerry's, it will always be awesome. It will never let you down. And that is a rare thing in life, to have a permanent thing that you can always take pleasure from. And food's unique that way.
Yeah, you hit me with Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey. That comes up on the show a lot, so... I want to touch on something I heard in one of your videos. I wrote it down. It said energy intake as to why you're not losing weight, not about energy output. So it's not necessarily like getting on the stair steppers or going to CrossFit and outputting to lose weight, but you really got to manage what you're taking in and prioritize that. Is that
it's too
accurate?
bad, but it's true. So, I've called it exercise. Exercise is the world's best drug, but it's not a weight loss drug. And it's not for a few reasons. So, and the studies are clear on this. In a laboratory setting, it doesn't matter whether you don't eat 500 calories or you burn 500 calories. It has about the same effect. We don't live in laboratories. So in real life, we have a bad habit of eating back our exercise. I know I do. Mm-hmm. I imagine you do too. We all do. We feel like we've earned the right to eat more indulgently when we're doing a better job with our fitness. Yeah. We're also, as a society, being primed to think that we're supposed to do that, right? From recovery beverages and refueling and electrolytes and all that nonsense, because it really is nonsense for 99.99% of the population. They're truly, the endurance athletes might need to care about that stuff. Professional athletes maybe too, but everybody else probably not. So we're conditioned to think we're supposed to eat it back. We tend to reward ourselves for our exercise, and that's going to change things. And then there was this cool study that came out just a few weeks ago talking about something that the researchers called constrained energy expenditure. I'm not sure if you saw the study, but what the study found was that what you would expect if you're looking at total daily energy expenditure, you'd expect that as you exercised, your total daily energy expenditure would go up linearly, like you'd see this, linear rise. That's not what they found. What they found, and again, using objective measures with calorimeters and doubly labeled water and so forth, was what they called constrained energy expenditure, which is as your exercise rose, mm-hmm. your total daily energy expenditure got blunted and started coming off, where basically your body was turning itself down because you were doing too much. Wow. It was trying to conserve energy in the face of clearly a very bad hunter who was not managing to catch its prey and trying to keep the body alive longer. It was a very unfortunate finding, but it does help to explain why when we look at studies of 20 years worth of physical activity to see if it correlates with weight loss or weight in general, mm-hmm. the best studies basically show that huge amount of exercise slow down weight gain, but they certainly don't reverse it.
Do they specify what kind of exercise in that study?
In the constrained energy expenditure study, I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I don't remember what they were doing at the time, but that's the other thing that I sometimes talk about when I give talks on exercise. So the American College of Sports Medicine says that you need to exercise 300 minutes a week to prevent weight gain. 300 is a lot of minutes for most of us. I mean, so I happen to own a gym, like my office where I am now, just down the hall, there is a gym. So I have access to facilities that most people don't. And I have a job where, I talk about this all the time. I've got to walk my talk. But, in a good week, I'm probably doing 220, 240, not more. And when I give these talks, and I'm giving these talks to healthcare professionals who are interested in nutrition and obesity, and I ask for hands for the number of people who are exercising enough to simply not gain weight, I get like 2 out of 100. It's a rarity. And so yet we see exercise being billed in society as the ticket to the weight loss express, in part because of idiotic TV shows like The Biggest Loser or Extreme Makeover, Weight Loss Edition, whatever the hell that's called.
Yeah.
But it is a perpetual message that we have to fight against. You lose weight in the kitchen. You gain health in the gym. It's not, they're not one and the same.
Yeah, that's fascinating with the weight loss thing. So, what about like long, steady cardio to burn off fat? I've heard that at a low heart rate, it's really effective. And
so that's where I guess I come into things as the clinician who believes in being pragmatic and realistic. So ultimately, if the question is, what's the best exercise for weight management? What's the best exercise for fat loss or anything like that? The answer, as trite as it sounds, is whichever one your patient or your client likes enough to keep doing. Like there is no right. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you enjoy enough to do is good. And I would generally encourage people from a health perspective to mix it up. It'd be good to have some resistance training for sure. So as far as functional independence goes, functional independence, that's the term we give to being able to wipe your own body parts for longer. Just being able to live on your own as you get older. That resistance seems to be key. So getting, clients who are older into resistance training, I think that there's a real role for that. Aerobic training, endurance training, there's a role probably for that too. And as far as cardiac health goes, maybe there is for body fat, but I've never seen anything convincing. As you probably know, you can find whatever you want in the medical literature.
Yeah.
You can find studies that support whatever position you've got, whether it's which exercise is best, what meal frequency is best, what diet is best. You will find support for your assertions in the medical literature. And if you want to then ignore all of the other studies that say otherwise, you can. But, there is no best because there's so many different people with so many different real life things having a bearing on both diet and exercise. It almost becomes counterproductive to even have a discussion with somebody about what would the best one be for this, rather than what would be the one you would actually like to keep doing, which I think has much more value to people.
Yeah, it's like if you go into Barnes & Noble in January, you see the table out front of the 50,000 diet books, and all of them have before and after photos in them and testimonials, and this diet's great regardless of if they're eating grains, dairies, sugars. I mean, there's a lot out there when people apply that seems to work, but they all have that underlying theme of A, applying it, and B, managing the intake, it seems like, not necessarily the output.
But I think that there are success stories everywhere. So I write a little bit about the National Weight Control Registry, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. But for people who might not be, so the registry was established in the 90s. So that was the low-fat era of weight management. Mm-hmm. And so what they did was it was before the internet or before it was big. They took ads out in, I think, Cosmopolitan magazine, asking people if you've lost weight and kept it off 30 pounds for more than a year, then you are allowed to apply to become a registrant. And then they would then try to explore, well, what are you guys so much better at than everybody else? I believe there's over 10,000 people in the registry now, where the average person in the registry has lost 67 pounds and kept it off for 5.5 years. So they're really good at what they do. But they do all sorts of different things, right? So there's low-fat people, there's low-carb people. I'm sure by now there's paleo people. There's people who lost it with all-liquid diets and then managed to keep it off otherwise. There's people who it took them 7 years to lose the weight. It's everything. It's the whole gamut of stuff. But I'd be willing to wager if you interviewed those 10,000 people and just asked them specifically about whether they feel what they're doing is suffering, they'd likely say no. I think that is their secret. They enjoy their lives enough to keep doing it. It's for sure effort. The inconvenient truth of healthy living is that effort is absolutely required. But I think when the effort is suffering, people ultimately quit.
That's going to be the Facebook quote for this video right there. That was good. I like that because you're so right on with taking those people and doing what they like instead of suffering, and that when it's not fun and you link all this pain to it, you're less likely to follow through. So going back then, I guess, to kind of universal things that seem to work for 90% of people.
Yeah.
What are some of those? You mentioned a food log. That's really good.
Yes, a food log, not being hungry. Big ones are restaurants and liquid calories. I mean, they're both huge in society nowadays. And liquid calories are ridiculous. The amount of liquid calories people are drinking on a daily basis, it doesn't even matter whether it's from, sugar-sweetened beverages. I know everybody likes to point their fingers at Coca-Cola, me too, but people are drinking plenty of other liquid calories. I treat them like I would treat any sort of treat in a sense. It's the smallest amount of liquid calories you need in your life to like your life. I need, a good 150, 200 worth of scotch most days. That's where I spend my liquid calories. But I don't have them anywhere else. I don't drink milk. I don't drink juice. I don't drink soda pop. I don't put cream in my or anything in my coffee, not because I'm opposed to any of those things. I just don't think it's worth it to me. And then restaurants is enormous. I mean, restaurants, the amount of restaurant frequency of the people who I see in my office is staggering. People, it's more common that I will meet someone who's eating at a restaurant or takeout or a supermarket takeout or fast food 4 times a week than it will be for me to meet somebody who's eating less than 4 times a month. I mean, it's so strange. And you look from this Skype call to be very young. I am less young
and fit.
Yeah, so I am less young, and I can tell you, like the old curmudgeonly, when I was a kid, like restaurants were a really rare treat, really rare. And I talked to anybody from my generation or older, and it was a rarity. We didn't do it. It wasn't, celebrating the fact it was Thursday. We went for birthdays, and we went, when we were traveling for sure, but that was it. And so that is a huge piece, getting back into our kitchens. That's one of the things I actually love about paleo in general, is the emphasis on cooking. I think that is one of the best things about, paleo as a whole, is there's so much more emphasis from people who care about paleo to cook from fresh whole ingredients. And ultimately, I think that if we could get people cooking 95% of their meals from fresh whole ingredients, it almost doesn't matter what they're making them out of. Of course, some of them will be less nutritious than others, but that would go a hell of a long way. Restaurants, their job is to make food indulgent. Mm-hmm. And the eggs in the restaurant taste good because they've been fried in 2 tablespoons of butter. Like, you don't do that at home, or most people don't do that at home, at least not if they're worried about weight. So ultimately, getting out of restaurants is a universal thing. Again, it's the smallest number of meals out you need to like your life, and that will differ. Some people need to eat out because it's part of their job requirements, and some people are more social than others. I think of my single patients who are, in their 40s or their 50s. For them, eating out is a huge part of their social lives, and social lives are part of health too. Yeah. And so it's figuring out what will work for an individual, but minimizing that would be huge, and minimizing liquid calories is huge as well.
Okay, so food log, liquid calories, eating out. What's your diet look like? What do you do to achieve where you're happy?
My diet, I mean, I'm a lucky man, so I would describe my diet as 85% of what my wife gives me and 15% whatever the hell I want.
Sounds good.
If we look at what we do, I mean, we're definitely not, I'm guessing that, as far as macros go, I'm probably 45% carbs, 25% protein, 30% fat. I think that works out to the right numbers. That'd be my guess off the top of my head. But I've never actually crunched my macros to see what they look like. We do cook the vast majority of our meals from fresh whole ingredients. I've got 3 little girls. So my oldest is 11, my youngest is 6, and they're involved in cooking. They do meal planning. So every Sunday we've got a whiteboard on the fridge. And the kids take turns, and they're each responsible for laying out the entire week's breakfast, lunches, dinners, and snacks. We treat the kitchen with respect. We've cultivated as a room of love and as happiness, and not a room where we just throw our keys and heat up boxes and mix them with jars. And I think that, from a kid perspective, it's such a strange thing, society now. We've got a society that prioritizes kids leaving home knowing how to play soccer or hockey, but not knowing how to cook 10 meals from fresh whole ingredients. And so we've tried to reverse that. And again, it does take effort, and sometimes a lot of effort. So Thursday nights, my wife works. I come home, and So I've got to do the kids' lunches, clean their lunch bags, pack the lunches, make the dinner, and so forth. I'm in the kitchen for a good 2-3 hours, but I mean, I throw myself in front of a bus for my children. Why wouldn't I cook for them? I mean, we're building them out of the foods we give them, literally. I want to give them good ones.
Yeah. We got a lot of parents listening right now. And kids' nutrition and educating them is something I'm really fascinated in. It's funny you bring it up. We have Joe Cross coming on in 30 minutes or so. He did the new documentary called The Kids Menu. I was just watching it. It's all about, he did the Fat, Sick, Nearly Dead one. And so this is his new one. But empowering kids and educating them and teaching them. Do you have any advice for parents out there if they have kids and they're trying to get them interested?
Certainly, one of the main pieces of advice I would give is not to make it about obesity, not to make it about health, not to make it just, it's parenting's easy to describe and tough to do. You want to live the life you want your kid to live. I mean, that's parenting. That's all of parenting. It doesn't matter what you want, and so again, I'm a dad of 3 girls. I just came from my accountant's. It's year end over here, and he's a younger dad, and he was asking me some questions about things. And I explained to him that I not only try to live the life that I want my kids to live, but I'm also trying to be the man that I hope one day they will look for to marry, in a sense. So I help around the house, and I cook, and I'm kind to my wife. And, I think we forget that sometimes. Instead, we've got this sort of top-down, let's tell the kids what to do. Let's tell them how to live. Let's tell them to go outside and play. I think that we need to do those things. We need to role model them. We need to be them. If you want your kids to go outside and play, go outside and play with them. Like, teach them that a normal family life is an active one. Where I get concerned, and I have no idea, I haven't watched the movie, so I'm not speaking against it. Again, not a clue. But I always worry about the kids as far as things like their self-esteem, their body image, their relationship with food. And these are kids. Kids do not have fully developed frontal lobes. Kids do not have insight. And kids hear things in ways that we don't intend them. And so, I worry about the messaging around this stuff with kids, which is why I think instead teaching by doing is the best way to go. That doesn't mean you can't have discussions around things. So, for instance, an important piece for sure, we were talking about liquid calories. So I talk about the fact I don't like to, waste my energy. I'd rather eat my food than drink my food. But I don't talk about why. I just talk about that's what I prefer, because that's what kids tend to role model and do. And if they ask why, I'll answer. Clean Your Plate Club is an unfortunate club that still exists in many families. I make a big show from time to time about not cleaning my plate. I've had enough. When I've had enough, I don't want to have any more. And you don't need to if you, that is the way I want kids to get taught, not by way of sort of education, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It's again kind of emphasizing what not to do versus showing them what to do. And I think the showing them what you said, the modeling is more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a rare household where the kids do not, at least when they're young, want to be like mom and dad. I mean, that's just what childhood's all about. Of course, it ends, so as my kids are getting older, I see it. I mean, every day that goes by, you've got less influence on your children, literally. But my hope is that we establish enough of a foundation of what family life is supposed to look like in their mind's eyes, that even if they don't follow those ideals throughout their teenage years or even their early 20s, when they do settle down and have families of their own, they'll remember that this was the way they were brought up, and hopefully, unless we're doing a horrible job of it, want to emulate that.
Yoni, we're coming up on time, man. This has been a really fun call. A couple more questions that we end the call on for all our guests. This one's my favorite one. Over the last year, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned in regards to health, wellness, or your work?
Oh, well, I mean, so this is, I guess, cryptic, but the biggest lesson is not, how would I put it? You can't assume things. And so we're working, for instance, with our Ministry of Health here in Ontario. We've got 2 programs that are free, in a sense. I mean, they're not free because we pay for them out of taxpayer dollars, but they're funded by the Ministry of Health. We love our programs. They're awesome programs, but you can't assume that decision-making is going to be rational about the things that you care about in your life. even if you've got good outcomes, even if you are a tremendous trainer or dietitian or doctor or whatever you are, it doesn't change the fact that life sometimes throws curveballs. And it's easy to kind of forget about that when you hit your stride and you think, oh, listen, everything's going to come up roses. It doesn't always come up roses.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite resources or books, or where do you get your information? What's your favorite?
To be honest, my favorite is Twitter. I am a huge Twitter user. I love Twitter. I love Twitter because basically if you use it properly, which is sort of only reading the people who you care about. I mean, I follow a ton of people, but I've got a private list of the people whose stuff that I want to read on an everyday basis. They become this personal curation device where they identify the things that are actually important enough to read. The other thing that's amazing about Twitter is the ability to reach people you would otherwise never be able to reach. I mean, send an email to some fancy mucky muck somewhere, you're not likely going to get a response, but tweet to them and you might. And then you can also forge real relationships. I've got real professional relationships and real friendships that have come out of Twitter. I find it an invaluable tool.
Awesome. So the book, The Diet Fix, you working on anything new?
Well, so I've got a second book that we're shopping around. It's more about actually family life and kids and how to affect a healthy family, and looking a little bit at sort of the onslaught of crappy food that's pushed on the kids wherever they go. But we're still looking for the right publisher at this point.
Okay, so The Diet Fix, available on Amazon. Is that the best place to get it?
If it's North America, you can get it anywhere because that's easy. I mean, it might be in some brick and mortar places, but certainly any online retailer. The rest of the world, it's more difficult because we didn't sell the global rights. Okay.
And then for you, the best place to find you is your website?
My website, Twitter. I'm the only Yoni Freedhoff on the planet, so I'm very easy to locate.
It's nice to have a name like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but yeah, my website's weightymatters.ca because I'm here in Canada. And my Twitter handle is just my name, Yoni Freedhoff. And unfortunately, I'm pathologically attached to the internet, so I'm there pretty regularly.
All right, guys. Well, let them know what you thought of the show. We'll throw up the Twitter handle right here. Dr. Freedhoff, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. This was a fun one. Had a blast talking to you, and I love your non-dogmatic approach. I think the health community needs a lot more of that out there, especially with what you do, handling obesity. It's really important, so thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
PaleoHacks.com is the place to go for our blog, articles, and recipes. Mouth-watering stuff over there. I made the bacon wrap dates the other night. It was actually pretty easy. You just wrap dates in bacon, a little salt if you want, pepper. It was amazing. That's over there. Archives are over there too. Listen to last week's show with Wendy Myers about heavy metals. Awesome stuff. You want to get a hold of me, Clark at clarkdanger.com. Shoot me an email and I will respond. All right, that's it, guys. I'll see you next Thursday. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week.